Okay, this is our last panel, and thank you to all of you who have been such excellent participants. Our panel today is Gil Sperling and also Sheila Moynihan. They are both with the United States Department of Energy, and like the last panel, they're really here to really give us a forward look over the next 4 years as to what they anticipate coming out of DOE as it impacts innovative cities like ours, and also to gather feedback from all of you. And Gil and Sheila, we have represented here a broad variety of cities from, I see Kitty Piercy, who's the mayor of Eugene, Oregon, another great public utility city. We have Berkeley, California, we have Kansas City, Missouri, we have Salt Lake City, and we have Oak Park, Illinois, which is one of the first cities, if not the first city in the U.S. to get smart grids all across the city. So you have and of course we talked about Gainesville already because you know about our city. So we have a really interesting cross-section, and they all have had different experiences based on different climates and whether they're utility or not, and whether they control their schools or not, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to share just a little bit about each of our speakers. Gil Sperling is the Senior Advisor for Policy and Programs in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy at USDOE. He focuses on these programs and has for over, or just about four and a half years, is that what you said, Gil? And prior to that, he was in the private sector with Verdant Power, both as Executive Vice President and General Counsel, which was a company that focuses on energy generation from the free flow of water and oceans, tidal areas, and so on. Sheila Moynihan is an urban advisor to the USDOE, and she really focuses on stakeholder engagement within the agency, and obviously we are among their key stakeholders as mayors and city officials. And I'll close my introductory remarks with just a brief anecdote. As I bragged last night, Gainesville was the first municipal utility in the United States to adopt a solar feed-in tariff where citizens can put on their roof or parking lot a solar system and sell energy back to the utility for a return on investment. And as I mentioned, it was the model that really exploded solar in Germany. So I was invited to speak to the German-American Chamber of Commerce in Berlin, and honored to do so. And the renewable energy industry in Germany is very mature. It was just like any chamber of commerce, whereas still in the U.S. the renewable energy industry is more eclectic, I would say. And one of them actually said to me, we, after hearing about utilities in the United States, we're really daunted as to whether or not the kind of thing that happened in Germany can happen in the U.S. because it's so much more complex. And I said, yes, we have 50 states with 50 different regulatory authorities. We have investor-owned utilities, municipal utilities, co-op utilities, and trying to get a single policy to take hold under that environment is dramatically more complex in a nation like ours. So that is what these folks deal with every day. It's a challenge, and we are here to make it easier for them. And so with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over first to Gil Sperling.
Thanks for that. Welcome to my life. Everybody hear me? There we go. I'm going to apologize first. I usually like to try to have some PowerPoint slides, but my daughter's been ill, and I have been home with her, and have not had a chance. So I'm going to run through a little bit about what we're doing department-wise. I'm going to focus on where Sheila and I are, which was in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, which has extensive ties and contacts with you. Talk about how we're organized, what some of our goals are, and then looking forward, some of the things that I think are significant changes in the way we operate and how it will impact you. And then, unless you have something you want, remarks, we'll open up the questions.
I can just say a little bit about the stakeholder engagement chapter.
Okay, perfect. All right, let me talk. The Secretary spoke, met with the Conference of Mayors just the other day, and I found that interesting. His focus has really been relief efforts on Sandy. The Department of Energy has played a major role. The fueling infrastructure, electricity infrastructure, the overall energy infrastructure was severely impacted. And the Secretary has been hands-on. And so the message he's asked me to bring to you is about energy resiliency at this point in time in preparation. And there's some of the obvious things. Let's move critical energy components off the ground floor and out of the basement. Let's put them where they're above where they can be impacted. Let's try to do things that could underground power lines and create more momentum in rebuilding areas that have been hard hit and putting power lines. I love the story he told about one of our partners, which is Oyster Bay, New York, which is a clean city. I think most of you are familiar with the DOE Clean Sites program. If you're not, you should definitely become a clean city. They converted 54 dump and refuse trucks to natural gas, and at one point in time, they were pretty much the only trucks that were available in doing immediate work because there was no gasoline and diesel available in the heavily impacted areas in Brooklyn and Staten Island. And so the natural gas and relying on natural gas and conversion of local fleets to natural gas becomes a high priority. Let me talk about EERE. We've got new leadership in David Danielson, our Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. He has brought an incredible vision and energy to what we do. We went about a year and a half without an Assistant Secretary, and that was a little frustrating. And now we, of course, are paying the price by having to get 3 years' work done in 6 months. David likes to say EERE is a place where clean energy happens. Clean energy happens here in EERE. We are the place where it all comes together. We are in DOE and then EERE, the largest government agency dedicated exclusively to clean energy. And for us, it's a long-term commitment. And what's interesting about where we are now is DOE has for a long time been one of the largest research agencies in the world, with a larger budget than many countries, so to speak. We're at a point where most of the technologies we work on, whether it's geothermal, wind, solar, within 3 to 5 years are going to be cost competitive with traditional technologies. We're at the point where it's moving into market as opposed to new technological and scientific breakthroughs. And when we're moving into markets, comes this outstanding recognition, and it is outstanding, that local governments and state governments probably have as much, if not more, to do with the adoption of clean energy than the federal government ever will. We can do research, we can do technology development. As you know, we have no more money. The Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant was one of the incredible success stories of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. But we're at a point now where we have to change our focus in terms of how we work with state and local government. And for years, we've considered local government, state government, stakeholders, one among many stakeholders. And I'm something called Designated Federal Officer for the State Energy Advisory Board, where I have representatives of state and local government who advise EERE. And for years, they've complained to me that we're not stakeholders, we're your partners. One of these days, you're going to wake up and recognize that. And I think the light's beginning to go off. You have more control over permitting, over a safety inspection. Obviously, the relationship for those of you who are public utilities, obviously the state in terms of the utility regulatory policy. There's probably no one single bigger obstacle to the adoption of distributed renewable generation or energy efficiency than utility regulatory policy. We as a nation want to reduce energy consumption, and we can. If we can reduce energy consumption by 1% a year for 10 years, we can eliminate all congestion and bottlenecks on the transmission grid. We can make the ability to move power around the country from inexpensive places to expensive places much easier. How do you do that when you'll bankrupt a utility whose profits depend on selling electricity and who have no interest with their regulators in reducing the sale of electricity? So those are issues that we want to work with you on. So let me tell you a little bit. We have 11 programs, in case you didn't know. Weatherization program, solar, biomass, hydrogen and geothermal, a wind and water program, a buildings program where 40% of the energy is used across the country, advanced transportation, plug-in hybrid vehicles, alternative fuel vehicles, electric vehicles, a sustainability program. We manage the Federal Energy Management Program, which is across the federal government and trying to get the federal government to lead by example. And we have an advanced manufacturing program that's really centered on what can we do both to clean up manufacturing in the sense of making it energy efficiency, and then to restore a dominance for American clean energy manufacturing. You know, it's been frustrating to watch the development of the photovoltaic industry, only to see most photovoltaic cells being built overseas and not in the United States. So what can we do? What types of new approaches? Our priorities, we've reorganized ourselves from those 11 distinct programs that rarely talk to each other, work together. David has put them into 3 buckets, and they're 3 logical buckets: renewable energy generation, sustainable transportation, and then saving energy. And what we've done is we've created a cross-milieu, cross-cutting matrix of where programs work together. We've created a revamped Office of Strategic Programs led by our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, who's a President Obama appointee, Mike Carr, who joined us in July from the Senate Energy Committee. So Mike brings a wealth of knowledge of politics as well as renewable and energy efficiency policy. And our strategic programs now cut across all 11, working from the front office to ensure that our communications, our policy development works. So Sheila's going to talk a little bit about that organization. Let me talk just quickly about some specific priorities. Transportation, reduce imports by 33% by 2025. I think most of you know there's been lots of press reports that the United States is on the verge of being the world's leading energy producer, being a net energy exporter. That's as a result of a lot of shale oil and natural gas, and the now emerging lower costs in terms of particularly solar PV and some of the wind technologies. We want to reduce vehicle weight by more than 50% with new advanced materials. We're working very closely with Detroit. We have a major effort to bring biomass transportation fuels, light duty, medium duty, heavy duty, trucks, rail, planes across the board, bring it down by $3 a gallon by 2017, and we're on track to do that. And I'm happy to say we're partnered very closely with the Defense Department, which does not like operating on fuels that come from hostile sources. It wants to have a domestic supply. So they've been a great partner. Most of you have heard about our EV Everywhere. We want a national infrastructure for electric vehicle charging, and at the same time bring down the cost of batteries. So it's technology development, but it's also a lot of local permitting and a local infrastructure development. To that extent, the Secretary has pointed out that plug-in hybrids in 1 year tripled over last year from 2011 to 2012. So we have consumer recognition and we have a market that's beginning to emerge. In the renewables area, I think you've all heard the President say this, 80% clean generation by 2035. We're very much an all of the above strategy. Whatever is going to reduce carbon emissions is going to logically fit within our definition of clean. We have run feasibility analysis within EERE. What happens if we try to do 85% renewables by 2050? And we have found that we can do that. We can do it cost effectively. We can do it without huge modifications to the transmission grid by incorporating energy efficiency. So we know we can get there with what are now commercially available technologies. And the cost is only going to come down. There are more improvements. We continue to emphasize reduction in the cost of solar. You've probably heard of our Sunshine program. I know we've put grants out for rooftop solar. I think it's about $22 million fairly recently. We are on track to reduce the cost of solar by 50 to 75% by 2020. And the Secretary's goal has been $1 a watt, and we're working toward $1 a watt. On energy efficiency, signature program right now has been the President's initiative, the Better Buildings Challenge, in which we've challenged corporate America and communities to reduce electricity consumption in commercial buildings by 20% by 2020. We have over 100 partners, many of whom are now communities. I want to encourage all of you to participate in that program. So, what can you guys do? What does this all mean, and then how can we work with you? Obviously, we want to encourage you to convert your fleets, plug-ins, alternative fuels, and establish infrastructure. We want to very much work with you to improve the permitting and the inspection procedures for fueling infrastructure, and particularly for distributed energy. It is very frustrating to know that in some locations in the country, you can apply for and get a permit to put solar PV on your home, and the exact same technology will take over a year to permit in another location. It doesn't make a lot of sense, and this is something completely within the control of both state and local governments, and where we want to try to work with you. As I mentioned before, join the Better Buildings Challenge, become a clean city. So what are we going to do in the absence of any likely funding or reauthorization of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant? We believe that the best function for the Department of Energy and for ERE is really to use our ability both to assemble information and distribute information and to convene people. So we want to bump up our technical assistance. We have a white paper we're developing internally. We hope we're going to be able to release it, or it'll be adopted as a program, in which we revamp and revise our technical assistance program so that we can bring you expertise and we can find mechanisms to share the best practices, whether it's the success of the feed-in tariff in Gainesville, whether it's what Oyster Bay is doing on converting local fleets, whether what's happening in Seattle with Mayor McGinn with his Better Buildings Challenge in commercial buildings. We think some things work, a lot of things don't work, and we want to try to get you the best of what there is and do it from around the world. The second part of that is to convene. What I have found as I've gone around the country is that when we bring investors, when we bring private sector stakeholders, non-government organizations, mayors, governors, state officials together, and we convene around specific topics and begin to introduce people who don't usually talk to each other, but who need to work together, we can create long-lasting partnerships. We started something with then Mayor Hickenlooper in Denver to create a partnership. That partnership is now met every single month and is broken down into 5 or 6 different work groups along the various lines, from low-income weatherization to moderate and upper income home energy efficiency retrofits, to transportation, to distributed renewables. And Mayor Hickenlooper is now Governor Hickenlooper, where this president had a difficult time in the last election taking hits for his clean energy agenda. There are many officials at the local level who have made tremendous strides and have been able to build positive reputations, positive feelings on clean energy. That's something that we want to try to help, and how did they did it, how did they succeed, how do we work together. So we'd love to be able to come into your city, use whatever reputation we have to help bring people together with you around a set of topics, bring some expertise. We do want to be able to provide some funding so that you would have some expertise available with you, and then work with specific programs. We look at energy efficiency. We've got something like $200 billion on the table in wasted energy in homes, businesses, and manufacturing per year. If we can scale energy efficiency and finance it out of the savings, which we can do, that's $200 billion back into your local economy across the country every year without any tax impact whatsoever. And obviously, the job creation aspects of that, the environmental aspects are huge. We're not going to be able to pay for it. Not enough taxpayer money, and there's not enough ratepayer money. So what we've got to do is pool the best ways and the best knowledge, the best business models, bring the private sector together and try to leverage to make it happen. So finally, we're going to continue our state energy program, our weatherization assistance program that I know you're all familiar with, and it's in all of your communities. We're going to continue the Clean Cities program. We're working as a partner in the Strong Cities, Strong Communities, the SC2 initiative launched by the President. We're in 3 of the 6 cities now and having discussions underway in others. So I wanted to leave this more for discussion. That's kind of the very broad overview. As you can see, we've got about 1 million things going on. We have a lot of excitement. I'm really looking forward to working with you. Sheila.
Hi, I'm with EERE's recently formed Stakeholder Engagement Office, and what was recognized in EERE is that we do a lot of great work, and we have good ways for our stakeholders, in this case really our partners, to become more involved in what we're doing. And we also have resources like case studies and technical assistance that's of interest to a lot of our communities. but we haven't done a fantastic job historically getting that information out. We might be good about talking about one individual program, but you might not know about the rest of our program. So what we are doing in my office is trying to look internally about how we're communicating within each of the programs and with our stakeholders. So we ideally want to serve as a liaison between local officials and state officials and the Department of Energy. So I am happy to give out my card to anyone that's interested in learning more about how they can become involved in some of the challenges that Gil mentioned, the Better Buildings Challenge, where we challenge mayors to commit a certain amount of square footage to become more energy efficient, or some of the opportunities through the EV Everywhere Challenge, where the president challenged the country to make electric vehicles as cost competitive and as convenient as gasoline vehicles in the next 10 years. And also, if you're interested in learning how to plug into some of the existing technical assistance programs that are already up and running while we go through the process of making the larger reforms to our technical assistance programs, feel free to contact me and I can put you in touch with those.
And one of the things that Dave has been insistent on is we answer the question I've heard from many of you: who do I call? You know, who do I call? And Sheila is our lead in terms of our urban outreach and working with cities. And we want to make Sheila the contact person. And Sheila will know who to work with. And we've created, as I said, this cross-cutting of strategic programs, which really has the ability to reach. And we have strategic practice groups, so we have people on assignment from each of the programs into these practice groups working with strategic programs. So we're doing, not only making it easy for you, but trying to give you a single point of contact. We're trying to make it easy for Sheila, so Sheila knows exactly who to reach out to and where to go. So with that,
Very good.
why don't we have a little discussion?
Okay, so we're going to have a discussion, and I think as Gil mentioned, this has been one of the areas of real success for this administration, and so you all have been the ones who made it succeed in partnership, as was said by DOE. So let's go with Mayor Kitty Piercy from Eugene, Oregon.
You brought this up at the, thank you for being here.
Sure.
Right? You brought this at the beginning of your conversation about as we use less energy, it's cost to the utilities.
Yep.
And so in Eugene right now with Eugene Water and Electric, we're seeing them have to raise fees for people in the community because of the success of their conservation program, the success of doing the things we wanted them to do. Have you thought about how you're going to help people over this hurdle? Because what I see in my community is people rising up and saying, gosh, we're in a financial crisis. We can't stand you raising costs for us right now, and they don't have any choice because they have to keep going. Have you been thinking about that and then thinking about how you might help them over that hurdle?
Constantly. You know, there are varying stories. We have seen utility efficiency programs actually increase costs for consumers, and yet we've seen many utility efficiency programs actually decrease costs for consumers. And it really falls into what the utility charges and how that charge comes about, and what's incorporated into that charge and how competitive resources. So in New England, in the New England Energy Pool, they have adopted a bidding scheme that essentially allowed energy efficiency resources to bid as an energy capacity resource. And the energy efficiency resources, which are new resources because they involve the deployment of new technologies and there's labor costs, et cetera, came in second only to fully depreciated existing power plants that are operating solely on fuel costs, very little other costs. So the mechanisms are many, and the question is how do you get the word out to people, and how do we work with you? And that goes back to this technical assistance. We can bring you models, we can bring you people who have invested, the companies that are doing this, the experts from other systems. You know, Austin has gone through a similar thing and actually been able to decrease costs. So, you know, there's different models out there, and we need to bring the information.
I would add one more thing, Pete, if I can.
Yes.
I just want to say that, you know, the double whammy for us is we had some of the cheapest
Sure.
energy costs in the entire country. So there's other places, ours look good as start with, but that doesn't make any difference when it comes to how people are feeling.
It's still a fact that regardless of what the price is, in most locations, 30 to 50% of the energy is being wasted. So if there's 30 to 50, there are savings. And the question is how do the savings measure up versus the cost of the deployment of the technology? And you can't get as deep, obviously, when the savings are smaller, but there are still steps that can be made. It can be done on a break-even or a cost savings point. It's a question of how it's structured.
Very good. Scott, yes.
Hi, Scott Bernstein, Center for Neighborhood Technology, and we operate one of the Better Buildings
Yes, we do.
initiatives in Chicago, and we're very happy to have your partnership. Just a couple observations. The people in this room represent places, and they're
Right.
asking the question about how to do comprehensive, cost-effective, place-based retrofits. Most of your programs are about technology and fuels. And I think the insight from the Better Buildings initiatives, whether they're the larger or the smaller ones, is that coordinating the knowledge and the financial resources and contractors correctly actually works. So you've got a winner there, and the question is, how can more places start to adopt that more quickly? So we piloted the multifamily program. It's being copied in 12 places now. We had to go get foundation money to pay the transition costs. Starting to work. Every one of these scale-up strategies continues to run into access to capital barriers, something we've talked about over the years. So help us understand what would lower the barriers to PACE financing, to underwriting rental housing, to helping small business, all the things that are capital access barrier rich targets of opportunity, including municipalities for that matter. Need some attention here. Is there a way to flex your loan guarantee authority, for example, to go into energy efficiency markets? Or is there a way we can try to reconvene some of the parties from the beginning of the administration's efforts to take a fresh look at this now that we have some winner models? I think people here are willing to roll up their sleeves to figure out how to do something. But you're not starting from scratch, is the point. So if we've got some successful models, how can the places that don't have them copy them? How can the places that do have them scale up faster? If there really is 30 to 50% or more savings, and there are there, doing it faster means doing something about getting capital access lined up faster and everything that goes with that. And cities aren't sitting on bundles of cash right now to do that. What they are sitting on is bundles of authority and the ability to convene and make markets possible to do it. And you've got a bunch of first adopters here looking for how to get beyond just the sort of demand response technical assistance to real market development.
Well, you know, we've spent the last few years, you know, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant gave us the authority with about $400 million. And we did put out a competitive solicitation. We have 41 places in the country, like Chicago, that have developed neighborhood programs. And the models they developed run the gamut. There were some involved with utilities, some not involved with utilities, et cetera, different financing mechanisms. And you know, it would be good if we could do this in 12 months, get all the information we need, know what the winner is, but it just doesn't work that way. So we've been collecting the information and also then reorganizing ourselves around the issues that are critical. So for the first time, we actually have an energy finance working group within the Department of Energy, something we didn't have before. Unfortunately, we're losing our leader, Richard Kaufman, who's moving to become the energy czar in the state of New York for Governor Cuomo, but we're going to continue our working group. We have looked at revolving loan funds. We are now great believers in development banks, financing authorities. State of Connecticut has moved in this direction. The city of New York is looking in this direction. Ways to leverage capital at extremely low cost using existing sources of funding that are available to, so reprogramming some of that funding. There are many places that have utility benefits charges where there is the ability to move the utility benefit charge away from some of the direct funding it's doing into more leveraged funding. It would be available for local governments. So what we have to do now, and we are, is aligning the resources internally and aligning ourselves through the Strategic Programs Office to take what has worked, to take the best from Chicago and from Atlanta, from New York, from Cincinnati, from Seattle, across the board. And then sit down, particularly, I probably spent as much time on Wall Street as I have with local governments. And I've probably spent more time with local governments than anybody at DOE in the last 4 years, coming out of my running the weatherization program to what my focus is, in the belief that if we're going to change this energy economy, we're going to do it from the local level up, both politically and financially. Wall Street's very interested. Wall Street has capital. Wall Street's looking for the models that will essentially, all banks make money by passing all the risk on to somebody else. So Wall Street is looking to take the risk out and have. We can't use the same structures that the oil and gas industry uses, master limited partnerships, real estate investment trusts. They're not available to us in energy efficiency and renewable financing. So we need to have a dialogue with Congress to do that. We need to have a dialogue with state and local government about leverage in terms of, we're not going to have a master loan guarantee program run out of the federal government that's going to support you, but can you have a similar program through a finance authority that will develop it? So that's where the technical assistance, and technical assistance is really a euphemism for us to take the best knowledge we have, embed it in people, and then get those people out and available to you. And do it in an agency that in the Bush administration closed down our regional offices and closed down our ability to have people locally located. And that's the challenge that we have. We think that there are good models out there. We think that the pricing and technology has gotten to the point. Clearly, energy efficiency technology pays for itself. A lot of distributed technologies are on the verge of a break-even price point being competitive with traditional. So we now think, what are the right policies and programs that can be put in place? And how do we work with you to overcome what for many of you is your biggest obstacle, which is your state capital, your state legislature, and the governor's office. And we think the way to do that is to work with you to put pilots and other programs in place that show the job creation and show the effect. The German feed-in tariff worked not because the subsidy was so high, but because it gave homeowners and commercial building owners the opportunity to control their own energy and make some money from their energy. Very simple concept. Let a homeowner make some money generating their own electricity and avoid having to pay a utility bill. Pretty attractive option. Well, how do we show that that produces net benefit, economic stimulus, and jobs? And that's what we need to do, and that will, I believe, sell the case.
I'm going to call on Mayor Pope and then Mayor Becker, and then I want to say something about master limited partnerships,
Sure.
so don't let me forget. Dave Pope.
So in Oak Park 18 months ago, we made the decision and became the first city in the country to shift to all wind.
Right.
So all of our electric for all residential and business and government is all wind.
A little louder, Dave.
I'm sorry.
We can't hear you.
So we're all wind at this point. We also have created a program, again, this is us acting with a lot of partnerships, but it's not at this point with federal partnership or state partnership, to create the Smart City USA project, which is it's interesting that as part of that partnership, we just signed a memorandum of understanding with the Korean Smart Grid Institute, which is an operation of the Korean Ministry of Knowledge Economy and leading Korean firms, along with National Labs and University of Chicago and a number of other labs. But what we're doing is we're creating the largest integrated residential solar project in the world. Integrated because I want to build on what you just said about feed-in tariffs and individual homeowners, that what we're doing is creating the prospect of an additional revenue stream. So you have individual homeowners who can use the solar energy to be able to power their homes. The example that I use in Chicago that makes sense to people is on July 20th when it's 104 degrees out. Everybody goes home, they slip on their air conditioners, and the generation companies have two options. They can either power up those other plants, which happen to also tend to be the dirtiest plants, or they can figure out a way to be able to get people to use less energy. The way they do that is through demand response contracts, where they pay larger scale users to shut off whatever they're using at that time. An individual homeowner can do that. However, if you can aggregate 200 households, you can get a large enough number of kilowatts to be able to actually contract with the generators to be able to provide a revenue stream back to those providers. There's also frequency regulation. There are other elements of, potential revenue streams that can go back to integrated groups of homeowners. You can get to the point where instead of tapping the rate base to build the next power plant, we can tap the rate base to a much lower extent to be able to provide incentives for folks to shift to more of a solar approach. But there's got to be both a regulatory environment and there's got to be a business model and an incentive structure that help to support that. Again, we're doing this through a lot of partnerships with folks who have a vested interest in trying to demonstrate a proof of concept. But once we prove that concept, being able to actually take this thing to scale is going to require some really important conversations and partnerships at the federal level to be able to help incentives. We've got a strong partnership with the local utility who also sees value in this. But again, they need to get to the point where they're getting paid for reliability, they're getting paid for efficiency, and they're not getting paid by the number of kilowatts that they're selling through their systems. And we need to sort of shift the entire discussion, we need to shift the way we're thinking about it, and we need to sort of engage in a dialogue, I think, including at the federal level through this partnership that you're talking about, to help figure out what that future regulatory environment looks like.
Yeah, well, one of the things we've established something called the State Energy Efficiency Action Network, which is a very broadly based group that's been meeting. And essentially it's looking at models exactly like that. What are the regulatory changes that are needed? One of them is utility regulatory. Another is residential energy efficiency. We have a commercial. We have workforce development. We have a variety of subgroups that are built within the C Action Network. And so that's exactly the kind of story. I mean, I can't describe a better model for what we want than what you're already doing and what you're trying to accomplish. We've done a lot of analytical work that I think can support what you're doing in terms of how the economics will play out and why it will work. But we need to obviously do that in hundreds of cities across America. And the shift toward understanding that local and state governments have to be partners, not stakeholders, and the shift toward understanding that utility regulatory policies are the fundamental obstacle, and we're not going to deal with them from the federal level, means we have to game change how we work. And I think you're a testimony to that.
And we talk about it sometimes as a matrix across the top: generation, distribution, and then the consumer side and utilization. Down the side, you've got the technical elements of it, you've got the business model elements of it, and then you've got communication and education. And there are important roles that cities can play in different, some of those 9 boxes to help advance this, just as there are partnerships, again, at the state and federal levels and with other
And it's a trite phrase. I'm from the federal government. I'm here to help. But there's no question that's all we can do. We're not going to have big slugs of funding. We're not in an environment that's going to allow that to happen. We've got technologies that are near pure commercial viability. We have many that are commercially viable. So how do we work with you? What resources can we best bring to you, knowing that we can't write you a check? So what can we do to help make that a reality? And I encourage all of you to think hard. We are there to help, that we do respond to requests.
Very good. Mayor Becker.
Yeah, thank you for being here and for what you've done as like all these communities, probably recipient of the Energy Block Grant Program. We're making great progress. We had you and I think talked about one time. There's some frustrations because the most effective program we wanted to do wasn't provable under your standards, but we're doing it another way. I want you to know now. Not as broadly. One of the things is I listened to a lot of really smart people here who are all, I think, doing different things in our community, and in some cases in our state. Our Public Service Commission, Public Utilities Commission, just passed a rate change to incentivize solar for the first time and have utilities get paid for it. That was the trick. They had to see a profit in providing a subsidy for residential solar, and it's happening. And in fact, the first use of it is happening this month in terms of kicking out. But I guess as I listen to this, it seems that you're not going to be able to be everywhere all the time. And if we can have a really effective clearinghouse of information through DOE, and maybe that exists, and I don't know about it, we have folks working on it, so maybe I know they're working with you a lot, but if we could have a really effective clearinghouse of information, of things that are going on that are working and not working, model ordinances, whatever it is that we need that can enable local governments, because I think this is where you're seeing it happening, to jump quickly.
We
went
launched.
through, for example, ordinance changes. We spent a year we had to change over 100 ordinances. If you guys haven't been through this, in our land use and planning and zoning code alone, and building codes, we had to make over 100 changes to get out of the way, basically. Because, we've all got these incremental ordinances at the local level. It's the hardest stuff to do. And it takes months and months and months of both assessment and then running through a process to make changes and being responsible for local conditions and all that kind of stuff. And that's something somehow we've all got to take on, because people aren't going to wait for 6 months if they're making a decision about what their HVAC system's going to be.
That's right. Well, we've launched the Clean Energy Solutions Center within our Office of Weatherization. It's not everywhere we want it to be. We've held more webinars than we've ever held before. So we're trying to, we also are doing more on Facebook, more on Twitter, more on social media than we've ever done before. So part of our revamped Office of Strategic Programs is a revamped communications effort. We actually have a head of stakeholder engagement. Sheila's working with Kerry Dugan, which is good to have. We have not had something like that before. And I do believe this Clean Energy Solutions Center is going to become, hopefully, a web-based, exactly what you said, clearinghouse. And not just a clearinghouse, but a two-way place where we want to have the ability for people to load the information. So we're looking at how do we standardize, how do we pull it together, so that we don't have competing computers talking to each other in formats. So all of it is underway. I know we will accomplish it. It's just a matter of when the time is.
Well, the software for that is all available now.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who has an online city hall. And every issue we have in the city now, we put on for a chat, basically. And it works fabulously well.
I said earlier I was going to come back to the Master Limited Partnerships, and this is a brief anecdote, but when the Republican convention was in Tampa, I was asked to go speak at a side event on an energy panel, and I thought, oh, these people are going to hate me, so let me think of what I can say. And I spoke about this opportunity for different types of legal entities, Master Limited Partnerships, I think also REITs, Real Estate Investment Trusts, to be able to invest in renewable energy. And that was one of the things that got the most positive reaction from this room full of Republicans. So in the kind of environment that exists in Washington today, I assume that those are the sorts of things that you have to focus on with respect to Congress in particular. The other thing that I was talking with somebody about earlier is energy efficiency in schools in particular, and also municipal buildings, obviously, because if you can do revolving loan funds for those types of things, they're good for it, and that ultimately those dollars are going to go back into another high priority of the president, which is education. So with that positive thing, I want to also raise a negative point, which I mentioned to you earlier, which is that it's great, the all of the above energy strategy on one level. On the other, we heard from Bill McKibben last night, and it was rather alarming what both the fracking practices, the shale oil, and certainly the tar sands are potentially doing to the climate, but also doing to the competition with renewable energy and energy efficiency, and driving away from those by dropping the cost of natural gas in particular so low. Is that the kind of thing that DOE struggles with or considers recommending policy on, or is that sort of more in the EPA's realm or some other branch of the federal government?
The environmental aspects clearly are more in EPA's realm, so although we do coordinate with it very closely. The market impact and the economic impact and the impact on technologies are very much what we focus on. We're obviously have been very involved in understanding fracking technology and its impact, both on water systems, there are issues with fracking associated around vibration, earthquakes, etc. So we've been very involved in that through a variety of offices at DOE. But understanding the economic impact of what low natural gas prices, of what becoming a net energy exporter, and working that into our policy analysis that we've done. And we still come out with the economic feasibility and the cost advantage to consumers of if we wanted to do an all renewable solution by 2050 of 85% of our energy. And it still works, even with all of those low prices. There are enormous markets worldwide. There's tremendous demand. The one thing about renewable energy is that it's not leaving the shores. It's going to be here. Its primary form of distributed energy is what really holds an incredible promise, and so economic stimulus. Whereas natural gas can be put into a tanker and shipped. And there is an export market, and there are markets that are willing to pay a lot more than U.S. consumers are willing to pay. So there are enormous number of economic impacts that lead us to conclude that ultimately the most viable economic, both environmental policy and economic policy, is going to be a very strong energy efficiency effort backed by these emerging, particularly solar PV, solar thermal. I was at an installation on Monday outside of Baltimore, 140-year-old building. I mean, it was amazing to go in. And it's a new company called Skyluber, which is part of a conglomerate that owns the Maryland Brush Company, which is where this 140-year-old building has its manufacturing. And what they did, basically, they've got a flat roof, and they removed sections of the roof. And you've all seen daylighting. Let's bring in more sunshine and reduce electricity costs. Well, these guys combine it with a solar thermal application. So they now, on an average day, when they're letting the daylight in and reducing 70% of their energy costs related to lighting, they're heating the fluid that they have in the solar thermal to over 200 degrees, and they're using it in the winter to heat 7 buildings. They're using it in the summer to cool. And they're doing localized cooling where people are actually working. They're doing very, very efficiently. It's a brand new technology. They just launched it. I was there to sort of cut the ribbon with the company. It had come out of some funding we had given them on development. There's so many things like that are happening now that ultimately, when you look at the economics, the lower price of natural gas, the increased supplies, the U.S. becoming the world's leading producer of energy and a net energy exporter aren't going to change where we can go.
Very good. I have Joel Rogers, and then Mayor Hartwell, and then Mayor Bates, and we may be coming to a close. So, Joel.
Okay, well, let me join others. Thank you for all the work, Gil, and I know it's hard. I have a couple of things to ask you about, and one or two to say. On the TA, in addition to the stories and the Clean Energy Solutions website and the flow of information, all of which is great, I hope there are some plans for actual bodies.
Yes.
I was very struck by the fact that we were working with a bunch of cities and we wanted to get all of their portfolios, their own buildings and then all their private buildings into ESPM, Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And in a lot of cities, they simply were not competent, didn't have the staff even to do that. So we thought, well, let's put together a SWAT team and put them into the cities. And I called the folks, the Energy Star, I'm blanking on her name now, and said, well, we have this little contract with this one consulting firm, we can put him on the phone for an hour.
Right.
And that's ridiculous.
Right, and we agree.
Okay, good.
And again, we don't control the appropriations. All we can do is ask, but I'm not going to let out too big a secret. We're asking.
Yeah.
We want more money so that we can put bodies or allow you to hire bodies.
Yeah, and just to put people into these offices and
Exactly.
train the people and so on. But the bigger question is twofold. One, you've assumed that, or you've said repeatedly that, well, the utility regulation, that's handled at the state level, and there's really nothing we can do federally. But FERC has some power. It doesn't have no power at all to influence the behavior of, the different public utility commissions. And I invite your comments about what your discussions are with FERC about using a little bit more of the power that they currently have. That's one question.
Yeah.
Second thing, it'd be great to get a sort of city equivalent of C-Action. Have you thought about that?
Yes.
But here's the real question. On the 1703, 1705 ones, and we've all talked to Silver and not entirely unhappy that he's left the department. But you continue to use those monies for big nuclear power plants and other sorts of things that have repeatedly shown themselves to be, much worse than, well advertised disasters in the same program, like say Solyndra. Take Solyndra as an embarrassment unit of analysis. I read Crystal River as 2 Solyndras.
Oh, hey, now Gainesville owns part of that.
Okay. Edwardsport
We didn't
is 3
screw up, but that's
Solyndras.
progress.
Hold on, let's just
I
do
think
some.
they take your points right. But
Watts Bar is 4 Solyndras, and San Onofre is now 5 to 7 Solyndras. In terms of cost, it's going to be put on taxpayers and ratepayers.
How much was Progress's nuclear power plant at Crystal River, just so I know?
That's about $1 billion.
A billion cylinders?
No, 2 Solyndras.
2
Solyndras, 500
$500
million.
million each.
All right. Anyway, but yet you continue to do that. I mean, you just did something last year for Ariba and Georgia Power. You're helping them with these things, and yet energy efficiency.
Are you confusing me with somebody called the Secretary of Energy or something?
Well,
He knows you're gonna have drinks with him later, Bill.
Those are not proven. I haven't seen Joel in way too long, and I missed this.
But come on, I mean, why can't we use the credit guarantees of the federal government to promote efficiency?
We worked extensively in looking at the authority that created the loan guarantee program, and it was, it was a combined decision between the Bush administration and Congress that established that program, and we did implement it to the best of our ability, and unfortunately in the political world there's no accepting that sometimes risk doesn't turn out the way you want it to turn out, but we all know that's the case, and we can defend every decision that we've made, and I think we've done a very good job on that. Unfortunately, the statutory authority around that program does not lend itself to the kinds of things we want to do. That's why we have to look at different ways to do it. That's why we're talking to states and localities about finance authorities. We're working in Hawaii and Honolulu and New York and Connecticut and a whole variety of other places to reprogram some existing funds that are available to support financing authorities. Are there things that in hindsight that I think policymakers would like to do differently? Well, I hope so, and that's the process that you learn by. But I do think that we're better informed by that, and on all of those fronts, moving in the direction. I will say on the technical assistance front, we are trying to back this with money. Hopefully, we will get the money. It'll be hard for us if all we have is a $6 million technical assistance budget, which is what we have now. We're not going to be able to do what we want to do. So we need expanded funding to do this. But even that funding is not going to be enough, so we're going to challenge you. This is not going to be simply call us and we'll send somebody. We're going to make sure that you demonstrated your commitment. We're going to provide technical assistance to Oak Park because of what they're doing long before we're going to do it to a city or municipality that has started nothing and doesn't even have a sustainability director involved. So we're going to look for real commitments of people, of money, to match in terms of allocating the priority of what we do on technical assistance. Hopefully we can significantly expand it.
That's the kind of
Did I
message
miss
this
one?
group loves to hear.
Yeah,
We're all
that's entirely reasonable. How about the FERC question?
John Wallinghoff wants very much to be in the forefront on energy efficiency, and he has worked very, very hard. FERC has enormous new authority when it comes to transmission and siting and conditioning. They do have, regulatory control over wholesale power purchases, but their authority in terms of decoupling or delinking utility profits from commodity sales is virtually non-existent. They are working and have worked and continue to work in these areas of forward capacity bidding and identifying energy efficiency as a resource. So they're working with the various power pools on a variety of models, and I won't go into the hit or miss that has taken place. Forward capacity markets existed, and then they realized that they weren't sending the right price signals, and then they've tried to adjust with other regulatory mechanisms that haven't been the most successful in the world. So FERC authority isn't exactly where I think you think it might be, or where we would want it to be. But there is an active dialogue underway and still trying to find things. And I know they are, they're sending requests up to Congress for certain changes they would like to make that would allow them to become much more aggressive in terms of the ability to influence local utility regulatory policies.
Okay, we are really out of time, but I'm going to call on Mayor Hartwell and Mayor Bates for the lightning round. Mayor Hartwell.
I'll be very brief. This is just a note of encouragement for your travels to Wall Street. There are cities my size, Grand Rapids, a little less than 200,000, cities my size and smaller, who are trying to figure out how to do significant renewable projects. And they're significant for us, but they don't rise to the dollar level that we can, that we're going to be able to justify the cost for bonding them. As you talk to Wall Street, creating some kind of an instrument that could allow aggregation of projects is going to be really important.
My favorite topic of conversation when I sit down with them.
That's a good one, Mayor Hartwell. I wish I
The advantage of bringing in Richard Kaufman, who had been with Goldman Sachs, was a deep understanding of that, and so we've had great dialogue.
Very good. Mayor Bates, last question.
a warehouse.
It seems like the federal government, in terms of what happened with the solar permit, solar financing, and FHA stepping in and saying some of these issues for lack of they would.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility with it? I mean, also FHA also torpedoed the administration on the underwater loans and all that. Do you think there's a chance that they'll change and we'll see it? And then the other question is along that line. Is in California, we see the solar being financed now by companies, basically saying,
Exactly.
down. You see that trending across the country?
Absolutely. I think the biggest change in the marketplace that doesn't need a lot of our push, and we will try to help in terms of dialoguing with you about how you can do this in order to make this a reality in your market, is solar leasing and solar power purchase agreements. The number of installations in states that have adopted policies that support that, and it has to do a lot with permitting, and some with renewable energy credits or energy efficiency credits. There's a series of policies that become important, but that has been the largest and biggest. On the property assessed clean energy, we continue to have dialogue. The concern of mortgage lenders, obviously, in having more tax assessments taking priority over mortgages, where property values weren't exactly supporting the mortgages, became acute, and the regulators responded. And unfortunately, despite years of doing this, particularly in low-income weatherization as well as some other places, we never really collected the data. So when they said, prove to us that the economics of the homeowner are going to pay, that it's more likely that they're going to pay their mortgage and their property tax, et cetera, we weren't able to do that. So we have had a 2-year program underway where we're collecting that data. And that is a discussion that will be held again. There continues to be interest on Capitol Hill in legislation on property assessed clean energy. There are a number of property assessed clean energy programs moving forward on the commercial side. Where a number of localities have just said, damn it, we're going to do it. And you want to take us to court, take us to court. So I feel somewhat optimistic, but I feel very optimistic on the primary financing mechanism available now on solar leasing PPAs.
Very good. Well, let's thank Gil and Sheila.